My name is Helen Porter. I am 70 years old, a widow for nearly 8, and I live alone in a small stucco house on the east side of Austin, Texas. The house isn't fancy, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a little garden in the back, but it's paid off and quiet, wrapped in the kind of stillness most people would call lonely. I didn't choose to live alone. When my husband Frank died after 44 years of marriage, life felt like it cracked in half. For months, I still reached across the bed at night, expecting to find him there. I still set 2 coffee cups out every morning out of habit, forgetting there was only me now. In the early days, silence was suffocating. Friends came by less often after the funeral. Casseroles stopped appearing on the doorstep. Neighbors who once waved every day now just nodded politely as they passed. I would sit at my kitchen table, staring out the window, wondering what to do with myself. But time has a way of reshaping grief. Little by little, I created a rhythm. I woke early with the sun, made 1 strong cup of coffee in my French press, and sat on the porch watching the light stretch across the garden. I watered my basil and rosemary every morning because Frank loved the way fresh herbs smelled when he cooked Sunday dinners. I read novels I had put off for decades, walked around the block every evening, waved to neighborhood kids as they rode home from school, and ended my nights journaling quietly before bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my life, and I learned to like it. My daughter Rachel lived across town in one of those brand new West Austin neighborhoods where every house looks the same, where lawns are perfectly trimmed and mailboxes are perfectly aligned. She worked in human resources for a tech firm. Her husband Mark was an engineer, and they had 2 kids, teenagers now, too busy with sports and school to do more than wave hello when I visited. When Frank died, Rachel called almost every day at first, asking if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping, if I'd thought about downsizing. At first, it felt comforting, like I hadn't been completely forgotten. But as months passed, the calls became less about how I was, and more about what she thought I should be doing. She worried I was driving too much. She worried I was lonely. She even suggested, more than once, that I sell my car. One afternoon, we had lunch at her house. I was telling her about my trip downtown to buy some new plants when she interrupted. "Mom, why are you even driving on I-35? That's dangerous for you." I laughed lightly. "It's 20 minutes, Rachel. I'm fine." She frowned, stirring her iced tea. "I just worry. You don't drive much anymore. Maybe you should think about selling the car." I shook my head. "Rachel, it's my car. I like having it." She smiled, but it was tight, like she was humoring a stubborn child. "We just want what's best for you." What she really meant, though she didn't say it out loud, was what's easiest for them. The truth she didn't know? I wasn't helpless. After Frank died, I started writing first as therapy, then as a habit, then as something bigger. I discovered an online webinar about self-publishing ebooks on Amazon Kindle. I thought, why not? I had time and stories to tell. My first book, Bloom Again, Gardening for Healing Hearts, was a mix of grief journaling and simple gardening tips, a reflection on how tending plants had kept me steady when my world fell apart. I expected maybe a handful of downloads, mostly from friends. Instead, it sold hundreds, then thousands. People began emailing me. "Your book helped me start my first garden after losing my husband. Thank you." Another wrote, "I thought I was alone in feeling this way. Your words gave me hope." So I wrote another book, and then another. I learned how to design covers, build an email list, and run a blog. 2 years in, I had a small but loyal audience, mostly women over 50 who looked forward to my posts every week. My side project quietly grew into something real. A reliable monthly income, creative purpose, and, for the first time in years, a sense that I mattered again. I never told Rachel or Mark. Part of me wanted privacy. Part of me feared the way Rachel might laugh and call it a cute retirement hobby. I wanted something of my own, untouched by their opinions. For a while, it worked. I built my business quietly, kept my routines, kept my independence. Then one Thursday morning this past spring, I stepped outside with my keys, planning to drive to the farmer's market, and froze. My driveway was empty. My silver Toyota Camry, my freedom, my independence was gone. At first, I thought it had been stolen. Heart-pounding, I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. Cheerful. Almost too calm. "Oh, Mom, don't be upset. We sold it for you," she said. I gripped the phone tighter. "You what?" "We sold the car. You weren't using it much. And Mark found a great buyer. We got a good price, too. This way, you don't have to worry about insurance or maintenance. We'll drive you wherever you need to go." I felt my jaw tighten. "Rachel, that was my car. You had no right." She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Mom, please don't be upset. It's safer this way. You should thank us." Thank them? For taking away my independence without even asking? I hung up without saying goodbye and stood in my empty driveway, shaking. That car wasn't just transportation. It was proof I still had control over my life. They had taken it without a conversation, without permission, because they assumed I couldn't handle life on my own. That day, something in me hardened. I wasn't just sad. I was angry. Angry at being treated like a fragile relic instead of a capable woman who had survived worse. I walked back inside, sat at my kitchen table for a long time, and stared at the counter where Frank's keys used to rest. I thought about all the other times I'd let Rachel decide what was best for me. Downsizing furniture I loved, switching my phone to one she could monitor, skipping trips because she worried. No more. That evening, I opened my laptop and pulled up my latest financial report. In the last quarter alone, my ebook sales and workshops had brought in $42,000. $42,000 earned from something I built completely on my own. For years, they thought of me as someone who needed managing, someone waiting for life to end. The truth? I was more independent now than I had ever been. I was running a business. I had readers from all over the country. I had purpose, freedom, and plans. They didn't know, but they would. I didn't tell Rachel right away. Instead, I doubled down on my work. I wrote 3 new ebooks in 2 months, launched a workshop teaching older women how to self-publish, and even started looking for another car, one I would buy on my own. With cash, no co-signers, no lectures. But this wasn't just about money or cars, it was about respect. I knew a day would come, sooner than I expected, when Rachel would see me for who I truly was, not who she imagined. And when that day came, I wouldn't stand quietly in the corner like I used to. I would stand tall and say, "This is me now." That day was coming, and I was ready. The morning after Rachel sold my car felt heavier than any morning since Frank's funeral. I woke up early, but instead of coffee and my usual porch time, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my empty driveway. It wasn't just a missing car out there, it was a piece of my independence that had been ripped away without even a conversation. I boiled water for tea, but even the kettle's whistle felt sharp. I poured it, let it steep too long, and didn't even drink it. My hands were tight around the mug as if gripping it hard enough could hold back the anger. I wasn't used to feeling that way toward Rachel. She'd always been my only daughter, my helper, my link to family. But lately, I realized she didn't see me as Helen, her mother. She saw me as a chore to manage. By 10 o'clock, I called a rideshare. It felt ridiculous, like I was a teenager calling someone for a lift. But I wasn't going to sit home and mope. The driver, a young man with music too loud and hair sticking out from under a cap, pulled up in front. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. "North Lamar," I said. Toyota dealership. Inside the dealership, I felt alive again. I told the salesman exactly what I wanted. Something reliable, safe, with enough power to take me anywhere I wanted without asking permission. I picked a 2020 Corolla, low mileage, clean interior, and I paid in cash. The salesman blinked at the check I handed over but quickly smiled. "Well, Mrs. Porter, you definitely don't need financing." "No," I said, smiling for the first time all morning. "I don't." When I drove that car off the lot, I felt a rush I hadn't felt since I was 25. When Frank and I bought our first home, my hands were steady on the wheel, and when I pulled into my driveway, I smiled at the sight of a car my car parked there again. I took a picture and sent it to Rachel with a short message. "Bought myself a car today. No need to worry about my transportation." Then I turned off my phone. The rest of the day, I poured myself into work. I had 3 manuscripts waiting to be edited, and an inbox full of emails from readers asking when my next workshop would open. Normally, I would pace myself, but that day I worked straight through lunch and into the evening. It wasn't just about keeping busy. It was about reminding myself who I was now, a woman who built something from nothing, who didn't need to ask for help to live her life. By 7, I had uploaded a new ebook to Amazon. Strong Roots, Growing After Loss. It was personal, more so than any of my previous books. In it, I talked about reclaiming independence, finding joy in new things, and learning to stop apologizing for existing. When I hit publish, I sat back, exhausted but proud. That night, Rachel called. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided against it. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone cautious. "I saw your text." "Yes," I said simply. "You bought another car?" "I did." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Mom, we only sold the Camry because we were worried about you driving. You don't need to be running around alone." "I appreciate the concern," I replied, my voice steady. "But you don't get to make that decision for me." "I'm not a child, Rachel." "I know, but..." "No buts. I manage my own life. Always have. Always will." Another pause, then she said quietly, "You sound angry." "I am," I admitted. "You took something that wasn't yours to take." She didn't answer for a long moment, then mumbled, "I'm sorry you feel that way." The kind of apology that isn't an apology at all, and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked around the house, touching things that carried Frank's memory. His old recliner, the framed picture of him holding Rachel as a baby, the toolbox he left behind. He always told me, "Don't let people decide for you, Helen. Know what you want and fight for it." For years, I'd let Rachel's voice become louder than my own, thinking it was easier to avoid conflict. But that day proved it. Silence cost me more than it saved me. The following week, something unexpected happened. My new ebook started selling faster than any of my previous ones. Within days, it climbed the Kindle charts in its category, bringing in hundreds of new readers. Emails flooded my inbox. "Your book gave me the push to finally move out of my daughter's basement. Thank you for reminding me it's never too late to take back control." Reading those messages, I realized I wasn't the only one treated like an obligation by family. There were thousands of women like me capable, intelligent, and overlooked. I decided it was time to do more than just write. I announced an online workshop, Second Chances, Building Your Life. After 60. It sold out within 48 hours. 50 women signed up, each paying $199. I stared at the screen in disbelief. That was nearly $10,000 in a single weekend. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. The next family dinner was at Rachel's house 2 weeks later. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted her to see me, really see me, for the first time in years. I wore a navy dress I hadn't put on since Frank's retirement party, curled my hair, and slipped my laptop into my handbag. When I arrived, Rachel smiled politely. "The way you do for company, not family." "Mom, glad you could make it." Mark barely looked up from his phone, and the kids muttered quick hellos before running upstairs. Dinner was roasted chicken, green beans, and awkward silence. Rachel made small talk about her work. Mark talked about a new client. No one asked what I'd been doing, so I didn't volunteer. But after dinner, when everyone was lounging in the living room, I opened my laptop. Rachel, I wanted to show you something. She looked wary. What is it? My work, I said simply. On the screen was my latest workshop dashboard. 50 participants, glowing reviews, and revenue numbers that made Rachel's eyes widen. I scrolled to my ebook sales, thousands of copies sold. You made this? She asked softly. Yes, I said. This is what I've been doing the past few years. Mark finally looked up, surprised. Wait. This is yours? All this money came from you? Yes, and it's just the beginning. Rachel's face went pale. Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I shared something, you brushed it off or told me to slow down. I didn't need permission then, and I don't need it now. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the dishwasher. Rachel looked down, fidgeting with her hands, and whispered, I didn't know you were doing all this. No, you didn't, I said gently, because you never asked. Driving home in my new car that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to shrink. For too long, I'd let my life become background noise in my own family's story. Not anymore. The headlights cut through the Texas night as I whispered to myself. You're not invisible, Helen. Not anymore. The morning after that family dinner, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to dread, but now it felt different, full of possibility. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and stared at the flood of new emails from women who had taken my workshop. One subject line caught my eye. You saved me from giving up. It was from a woman in Ohio, 64 years old, who had been living with her son and feeling like a burden. She wrote about how my workshop inspired her to apply for a remote job and start her own side business baking bread for local cafes. She said, I thought my life was over at 64. Now I wake up excited again. I sat back, holding that email like a warm blanket around my shoulders. This was why I kept writing. Why I kept pushing forward. I wasn't just filling my own loneliness. I was helping women reclaim their lives. But I also knew Rachel hadn't fully understood. At dinner, she looked shocked, even embarrassed, but she hadn't said much afterward. Part of me hoped she'd call the next day to apologize, to ask about what I'd built, maybe even to say she was proud. The phone stayed silent. By noon, I stopped checking it and focused on work. I had an idea, something bigger than anything I'd done before. My readers kept asking for guidance beyond writing and gardening. They wanted to know how to start businesses, how to find purpose again, how to handle family dynamics when those families didn't believe in them. So, I started drafting a mentorship program, Second Wind Collective. It would combine business coaching, personal growth, and community, a safe place for women like me who had been dismissed by their own families. I outlined the curriculum, pricing, and marketing strategy, the kind of work Rachel probably thought I wasn't capable of doing on my own. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice careful. Hey, Rachel. There was a pause. I've been thinking about what you showed us. The books. The workshop. I didn't know it was that big. I know you didn't, I replied. I guess I just thought you were, retired, doing little hobbies. I didn't realize that I could still create something of value, I said, sharper than I intended. She sighed. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? I asked gently. There was silence. Then she said, I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I think I just assumed you needed us to take care of everything. You assumed wrong. Another pause. I see that now. And I want to do better. Can we maybe have dinner again next week? Just the two of us? I exhaled slowly. Yes, Rachel, I'd like that. That weekend, I finalized the plans for Second Wind Collective and opened registration quietly. Without any ads, just a single email to my subscriber list. Within 24 hours, 35 women signed up at $249 each. I stared at the payment notifications coming in one after another, tears blurring my vision. Nearly $9,000 overnight. I called my friend Margaret, one of the few people who knew about my writing career. "Margaret, I think I'm actually doing this. Like, really doing it." She laughed on the other end. "Helen, you've been doing it for years. You just finally believe it now." The following week, I met Rachel for dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. She was already seated when I arrived, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. "Hi, Mom," she said, standing to hug me. "Hey, sweetheart," we ordered, and for a moment we just sat there, awkward. Finally, Rachel spoke. "I read one of your books this week. Bloom Again. It was really good." I cried. Honestly, that surprised me. "You read it?" "Yes. I wanted to see what everyone else sees in your work. And I get it now." I smiled faintly. "Thank you. I also wanted to say I'm sorry again. For the car, for treating you like you couldn't handle things, it wasn't fair." "It wasn't," I said, soft but firm. "That car represented freedom to me, Rachel. You took it without asking. That hurt." She nodded, eyes damp. "I know. I thought I was helping, but I see now I was controlling. I don't want to be like that anymore." "Then don't," I said simply. "Just see me for who I am now, not who you think I used to be." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I'll try, Mom, I really will." When I got home that night, I sat on the porch and looked at the stars, thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. I'd gone from being the quiet widow no one really noticed to someone building something bigger than I'd ever imagined. And yet, deep inside, I knew I hadn't faced the hardest part yet. Showing the whole family, not just Rachel, exactly who I was now. Because deep down, I still felt like a guest in their world, like one wrong move and I'd be pushed back to that quiet corner again. But this time, I wasn't going quietly. I opened my laptop and drafted a blog post titled, "They Forgot Who I Was, So I Reminded Them." It wasn't angry, just honest, about independence, about losing yourself in family roles, and about taking back your identity when no one thinks you can. By the next morning, it had been shared hundreds of times, bringing in new readers, new subscribers, and even a message from a women's magazine interested in doing a feature on my story. That weekend, Rachel invited me to a family barbecue. Normally, I would have politely declined. But now, I wanted to go. I wanted to stand in that backyard, among people who thought they knew me, and show them I wasn't the woman they had quietly dismissed. As I pulled up in my new car, heads turned. Mark actually dropped his drink when he saw me step out with a confident smile and a tablet tucked under my arm. "Nice car, Mom," Rachel said, trying to sound casual. "Thanks," I replied, clicking the key fob. "Paid cash." Mark raised his eyebrows. "Wow, must be doing well." I smiled. "Better than you think." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in their lives. I felt present, strong, seen. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning. The family barbecue had been only the beginning. For the first time in years, I'd stood there in Rachel's backyard. Not as the quiet widow they could overlook, but as someone who carried herself with pride. Still, I could feel the tension in the air, like invisible threads pulling everyone taut. Rachel was trying, at least I thought she was, but Mark's raised eyebrows and the kids' distracted glances told me the adjustment wouldn't come overnight. They had built a picture of who I was in their minds, an elderly woman who needed managing. Changing that picture was going to take more than a nice car and a smile. The following week, I focused on my work. The Second Wind Collective mentorship program launched officially, and within days, 60 women had enrolled. They came from all over. Florida, Oregon, even as far as Canada. Some were widows like me, some divorced, some simply tired of being told their best years were behind them. Every evening, I sat on Zoom calls listening to their stories' quiet voices at first, but gradually stronger as they realized they weren't alone. One woman, Teresa from Oklahoma, cried as she said, "I thought my children were doing me a favor by taking over my life. But hearing you, I see now I let them." I told her the truth. Taking back your life doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you whole again. The next weekend, Rachel called. "Mom, we're having a little dinner Saturday. Mark invited some friends from his firm, and we thought you might like to come." For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me still dreaded those gatherings, the ones where I sat quietly on the edge while conversations swirled around me. But another part of me, the new part, the one building something big, knew this was my moment. "I'll be there," I said. Saturday evening, I dressed carefully, choosing a soft burgundy blouse and slacks. Not flashy, but polished. I slipped my tablet into my bag because I had a feeling I might need it. When I arrived, the house was buzzing. Mark's colleagues were in the living room, glasses of wine in hand, talking about property investments and quarterly projections. Rachel smiled when she saw me, hugging me a little tighter than usual. "You look nice, Mom." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it when I smiled back. Dinner was salmon and asparagus, perfectly plated. Conversation stayed light at first school schedules, a neighbor's new puppy, but soon Mark steered it toward his work. The firm's looking at expanding next quarter. "Big numbers," he said, smiling proudly. One of his colleagues nodded. "Real estate's still hot here. Great time to build." Then one of them turned to me. "And what about you, Mrs. Porter? Retirement treating you well?" His tone was kind enough, but it carried that familiar edge, the one people use when they assume you spend your days knitting and watching television. I smiled politely. "Actually, I'm not retired." There was a short, awkward silence. "Oh?" he said. "What do you do?" I glanced at Rachel, who shifted in her seat, clearly not ready for me to answer, but I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not anymore. "I'm an author and a mentor," I said calmly. "I write ebooks and run a program for women over 60 who want to build businesses and regain their independence." A few heads tilted. Mark frowned slightly, as if trying to process it. "You mean like a blog or something?" "More than a blog," I said. I reached into my bag, pulled out my tablet, and opened my dashboard. This quarter alone, my ebooks sold over 15,000 copies, and my mentorship program just enrolled 60 women at $249 each. I slid the tablet across the table toward Mark's colleague, who glanced at the numbers and let out a low whistle. "Impressive," he said, passing it to another guest. Mark cleared his throat. "Mom, you didn't mention you were doing all this." "You didn't ask," I said gently but firmly. Rachel stared at the screen, her face pale. I had no idea it was this big." One of Mark's colleagues chuckled. "Helen, you're running a business better than half the startups we see." I smiled, feeling the heat in my cheeks but refusing to shrink. "I suppose I am. And I love it." Mark leaned back, rubbing his chin. "So this is why you bought that car?" "Yes," I said. "Because I can. Because I wanted to. Because my life doesn't need approval to be valid." The room was silent for a beat too long. Then one of the guests clapped lightly. "Good for you. Honestly, this is inspiring. My mom just retired, and she's been feeling lost. I'm showing her your site." Rachel's eyes glistened, but she quickly looked down at her plate. After dinner, I excused myself to the patio for some air. A moment later, Rachel joined me, arms folded. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I feel like I've been underestimating you for years." "You have," I said softly. "But I understand why. It's easy to put people in boxes. You thought I was just a lonely old widow. I let you think that because it was easier than fighting to be seen." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. For the car, for everything." "I know you are," I said, placing a hand on her arm. But Rachel, you need to understand something. I'm still me. I'm not fragile. I don't need permission to live my life. Her eyes filled with tears. I guess I thought I was helping. Maybe you were trying to, I said. But help without respect isn't help, it's control. She nodded slowly. You're right. For the first time in years, I saw her really look at me, not past me. When I drove home that night, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, pride, and something like grief for all the years I'd stayed quiet, letting others define me. But that was behind me now. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest. If I could change how my own family saw me, maybe I could change how entire communities saw women like me. I spent the day mapping out an expansion for Second Wind Collective, a podcast, a series of live events, even a possible retreat for next year. I wrote a blog post titled, "Stop Waiting for Permission," and within 24 hours, it had over 3,000 shares. Women wrote things like, "This is exactly what I needed today," and "I thought I was invisible. Thank you for showing me I'm not." The following week, Rachel called again. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, the kids have been talking about you non-stop since dinner. They want to know how you do all of this. Tell them I'll show them next time," I said with a smile. And for the first time in a long time, I hung up the phone feeling not just like someone's mother or grandmother, but like myself again, whole, respected, and finally seen. The week after that dinner felt like a shift in gravity. For years, I'd been orbiting my family's world, quiet and unnoticed. But now it felt like the roles had reversed. They were looking at me differently, curious, maybe even a little intimidated. Rachel called more often, sometimes just to ask how my day was going. Mark even sent me a link to an article about online education, with a message that said, "Thought this might interest you for your mentorship program." It was strange, like watching them relearn who I was. But with that new attention came something I hadn't anticipated. Interest in my work, not out of support, but out of opportunity. It started when Rachel invited me for coffee one afternoon. "Mom," she began carefully, "Mark and I have been talking. We're really proud of what you've built. It's incredible, honestly, but we also thought, maybe you could use some help scaling it? Mark has marketing connections, and I know people who do web design. We could make this thing huge. Like really huge." I sipped my coffee, studying her face. "You want to be part of the business?" "Well, not exactly part," she said quickly. "But like partners. We could manage the business side, so you don't have to stress. And you could focus on content. It could be a family thing." For a moment, I was quiet. I'd been waiting for them to see me, to respect me. But this felt different. This wasn't about respecting what I'd built. It was about taking control of it. "Rachel," I said gently, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for partners. I like managing my own business." Her smile faltered. "We're just trying to help, Mom. You don't have to do it all yourself." I placed my cup down slowly. "But I want to do it myself. This is mine, Rachel. I built it from the ground up, and I need it to stay that way." She nodded but looked unconvinced. "Okay, sure. I just think you're missing a big opportunity." That night, I sat at my desk long after sunset, staring at the mentorship program dashboard. Registrations were still rolling in, the community forum was buzzing, and I had interviews lined up with 2 podcasts. I should have felt proud, but instead, I felt uneasy. It wasn't just about Rachel wanting to help, it was the tone, the unspoken assumption that I couldn't handle success without them stepping in. I opened my journal and wrote in big letters, "This is my second chance. No one else gets to own it." A few days later, I hosted the first live group call for the Second Wind Collective. 55 women appeared on the screen, each from a different state, each carrying a different story. One woman, Donna, said she hadn't worked in 30 years and felt invisible in her own home. Another, Teresa, shared that her adult children had taken over her finances because they assumed she couldn't manage money anymore. I listened, heart aching because I knew exactly how that felt. "Ladies," I said, looking at them through the camera, "here's what I need you to hear. You are not done. You are not fragile. And you don't need permission to own your life again." One by one, their faces lit up. Some cried, some smiled, but all of them looked like they'd taken their first deep breath in years. When the call ended, I sat back, tears in my own eyes. This was bigger than me now. It wasn't just about proving something to Rachel or anyone else. It was about building a place where women could remember who they were. That weekend, I took my granddaughter, Emily, out for lunch. She was 16, sharp as a tack, and always half buried in her phone. "Grandma," she said between bites of her burger, "Mom says you're famous now? Is that true?" I laughed. "Hardly famous. But people do read what I write, and some even pay me to teach them things." She set down her phone. "That's actually really cool. I didn't know grandmas could do stuff like that." "Grandmas can do a lot of things," I said, smiling. "What about you? What do you want to do someday?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I like drawing. Maybe graphic design or something like that. But everyone says it's too hard to make money doing art." I leaned forward. "Everyone once told me it was too late to start a business at 70. They were wrong. Don't let other people's fear decide what you can or can't do." Her eyes lit up, and she smiled for the first time that day. "Will you teach me? Like how you do all your online stuff?" That moment hit me harder than any workshop registration or podcast invite. This was the legacy I wanted to show my granddaughter, that she didn't have to wait for permission either. Monday morning, Rachel called again. Her tone more businesslike this time. "Mom, I was thinking if you gave us access to your accounts, we could manage customer support and maybe do paid ads to get you more traffic. We could even rebrand it, make it more modern." I closed my eyes for a second, gripping the phone tighter. "Rachel, we've talked about this. I'm not handing over control. This is my work." She sounded frustrated now. "Mom, you don't understand. This could be huge, like national news, huge. You need a team." "I have a team," I said firmly. "It's me. And that's enough right now." A long pause, then she muttered, "You're making a mistake," and hung up. That evening, I felt the anger bubbling again. But instead of calling her back, I opened my laptop and recorded a video for my mentorship group. In it, I talked about boundaries, how sometimes the hardest part of reclaiming your life is telling the people you love no. I said, "You can love your family and still keep your independence. You can accept their concern without surrendering your life. And sometimes, the best way to teach them is to succeed anyway." By the next morning, that video had been shared over 200 times outside the group. Emails poured in from women, saying they showed it to their own families. One wrote, "My daughter finally understood why I need my own bank account. Thank you." Later that week, Rachel showed up at my house unannounced. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking equal parts angry and hurt. "Mom, why are you shutting us out? We're just trying to help." I took a deep breath. "Rachel, I'm not shutting you out. I'm protecting what I built. I let people decide for me once, and it cost me my independence. I won't do that again." Her eyes softened, but she shook her head. "I don't want us to fight." "Then stop trying to take over my life," I said gently. "Be proud of me, Rachel, but don't try to own me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down at my kitchen table, quiet for a long moment. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, I'll back off. I'm just not used to seeing you like this. That's because I hid this part of me for too long," I said softly. "But I'm not hiding anymore." When she left, I felt lighter, like something had shifted again. Maybe it wasn't perfect yet, but it was progress. That night, I opened my mentorship forum and posted, Today, I told my daughter, no, not because I don't love her, but because I love myself too. And that's okay. Within minutes, the comments came pouring in. Me too, Helen. I said no today, and it felt good. Another wrote, you make me brave. For the first time in decades, I felt fully, completely in control of my life and proud of it. A week passed after Rachel's visit, and though her promise to back off still rang in my ears, I could sense the unease between us. She called less frequently, and when she did, her tone was polite but distant. Like someone talking to a stranger they weren't sure how to approach. Part of me hurt, but another part knew this was what boundaries felt like. Awkward. Sometimes painful, but necessary. Meanwhile, the Second Wind Collective was growing faster than I'd anticipated. Women were joining not just from across the country, but from overseas. A retired teacher in London, a widow in South Africa, even a small group from Australia. I woke up every morning to dozens of emails, messages of gratitude and determination. One woman wrote, because of you, I told my son I'm taking a solo trip to Italy. He nearly fainted, but I'm doing it anyway. I laughed out loud when I read that. It was on one of those mornings that my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a voice introduced itself as Samantha Lee from a national podcast called Voices After 50. We'd love to feature your story, she said. You're exactly the kind of voice our audience needs to hear. A week later, I was on a Zoom interview, sharing my story. The car being sold without my consent, the quiet years, the ebooks, the mentorship program, and the way I'd rebuilt my life. Samantha's questions were thoughtful, and by the end of it, I felt lighter, like I'd just let go of years of silence. The episode aired 2 days later and quickly went viral within their niche audience. My inbox exploded again, hundreds of new subscribers, dozens of women signing up for the next mentorship session, and even a speaking invitation from a women's conference in Denver. I accepted without hesitation. That evening, Rachel called. Her voice was tight. Mom, you were on a podcast? Yes, I said calmly. They invited me. I know. Mark's coworker heard it and sent it to him. He said it's trending. That's good, isn't it? There was a long pause, then she said, Mom, you didn't mention any of this to us. We had to hear it from other people. I held my breath for a moment, then exhaled slowly. Rachel, I'm not hiding anything. I'm just living my life. You don't tell me every time you do something at work, do you? That's different. She snapped. This is big. People are talking about you. What if someone digs into our family? What if they twist the story? I closed my eyes, feeling that old familiar edge creeping back. Rachel, this is my story to tell. It's not about you. It's about me. And the women I'm helping. Her voice cracked. I just don't like feeling left out. You weren't left out, Rachel. You stepped back when I said no, remember? This is what stepping back looks like. There was silence, then a shaky breath on the other end. I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore. I softened my voice. I'm still your mother. I'm just more of myself now. Maybe that feels strange. But it's a good thing. She didn't answer. When the call ended, I stared at the phone for a long while, torn between guilt and relief. 2 days later, Mark showed up at my door unannounced. He looked uncomfortable, hands shoved in his pockets. Hey, Helen, mind if I come in? I led him to the kitchen and poured him a cup of coffee. He took a sip and finally spoke. Rachel's upset. She feels like she's losing you. And to be honest, I don't really know how to help her. I folded my hands on the table. Mark, she's not losing me. She's just meeting the real me. For years, I let her think I was fragile, and maybe I even leaned into it because it felt easier. But I'm not fragile. I've never been fragile. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm starting to see that. He hesitated, then added, She thinks maybe we should still help you, just in case it gets too big to handle alone. I smiled softly. Mark, I appreciate that, but this isn't about logistics. It's about respect. I spent years waiting for people to notice me. Now that they finally do, I'm not handing over what I built just because it makes someone else more comfortable. He rubbed his neck awkwardly. Fair enough. I'll talk to her. The Denver conference came fast. I stood on stage in front of 300 women, all there to hear about building life after 50. I told them about Frank, about the quiet years, about the day my car disappeared from my driveway and how that moment woke something up in me. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Women lined up afterward to shake my hand, some with tears in their eyes, others holding notebooks full of plans they were finally ready to start. That night, back in the hotel room, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back confident, energized, and completely unapologetic for existing. When I returned home, there was a card in my mailbox. It was from Rachel. Mom, I'm proud of you. I'm still figuring out how to handle all this. But I'm proud. Love. Rachel. I sat on the porch holding that card, tears stinging my eyes. Maybe we weren't fully healed yet, but it was a step. I went inside, logged into the mentorship forum, and typed, Sometimes the people we love struggle the most when we change, because it reminds them they might need to change too. Be patient, but stay firm. Your life belongs to you. The replies poured in. Needed this today. You make me brave enough to say no. I'm crying reading this because it's exactly my life. That night, I called Rachel. She answered quietly, almost timidly. Hi, sweetheart, I said. Hey, Mom. I got your card. Thank you. That meant a lot. There was silence, then she whispered. I'm trying, Mom. It's just hard seeing you. Different. I know, I said softly. But this is who I've always been. I just stopped hiding it. She chuckled weakly. Emily wants to intern with you this summer. She won't stop talking about it. I smiled. I'd love that. Tell her she's hired. For the first time in months, we both laughed. And in that moment, I realized something important. The distance we'd felt wasn't permanent, it was just the growing pains of redefining who we were to each other. The summer heat settled heavy over Austin, making the air feel thick and slow. Yet my house buzzed with energy every morning because Emily, my granddaughter, had officially started her internship. She arrived at 9 a.m., sharp laptop under her arm and hair pulled up in a messy bun, ready to learn everything. At first, she thought it was going to be simple uploading files, answering a few emails. But when she saw the depth of what I did, her eyes grew wide. Grandma, you're running a whole company, she said, half amazed, half horrified. Like, a real company. Yes, I said with a smile. And you're part of it now, so roll up your sleeves. She laughed, then leaned in as I walked her through online design tools, email marketing, and the analytics dashboard for Second Wind Collective. By lunchtime, she was scribbling notes and sketching logo ideas for a new project I had been quietly building, a digital course for women starting online businesses. That afternoon, Rachel came to pick her up. She stood at the door, peeking inside as Emily showed me a mock-up on her tablet. Look at this, Grandma. We can make it match your website colors. Rachel smiled nervously. She's really into this, huh? She's amazing, I said. She's picking up things faster than I ever did. Rachel nodded, hesitated, then asked, Can we talk? Alone? Emily grabbed her bag and gave me a quick hug before disappearing to the car. I motioned Rachel to the kitchen table where everything seemed to happen these days. I want to apologize again, she began, voice low. Not just for the car, but for the way I treated you. I think I was scared. When Dad died, you seemed so lost, and I thought I had to step in and manage everything. I guess I never stopped. I sighed, meeting her eyes. Rachel, I know you meant well, but you need to understand what it felt like for me, like I'd lost Frank, and then, piece by piece, my independence, too. That car was the last straw. She wiped at her eyes. I know. I don't want to be that person anymore. Good, I said softly. Because I don't need managing. What I need is family who trusts me. Rachel smiled through her tears. Deal. For the next few weeks, Emily came over almost every day, and Rachel slowly warmed to the idea that I wasn't fragile but thriving. One day, Emily whispered, "Grandma, I think Mom's jealous." Jealous of what? I asked, startled. Emily shrugged. You're doing all these cool things, and everyone's talking about you. She's happy for you, I think. But maybe she wishes she had something like this too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rachel, her practical nature, her knack for organizing, and how maybe she wasn't trying to take over my business out of greed but out of longing. She had spent so many years raising kids and keeping things stable, she'd forgotten what it felt like to build something just for herself. The next day, I invited Rachel for lunch. You ever think about starting something of your own? I asked after we'd eaten. She blinked. Like a business? Why not? You've got skills, HR experience, networking. You could help women find jobs or coach them on workplace transitions. Rachel looked uncertain. I wouldn't even know where to start. I smiled. Lucky for you, I teach that kind of thing. For a moment, she just stared, then laughed, shaking her head. Mom, are you seriously offering to mentor me? Yes, I said simply. If you want it. She bit her lip, then nodded slowly. Okay. Maybe I do. Over the next month, Rachel joined my mentorship calls, not as my daughter, but as a student. At first, it was awkward. Some of the women in the program recognized her from my stories, and she blushed every time they asked, "So you're the one who sold her car?" But she kept showing up, taking notes, even launching a LinkedIn page for a career coaching service she'd quietly dreamed about for years. One evening after a session, she lingered on the call while everyone else signed off. Mom, she said softly. Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed this. I smiled, my chest warm. Sometimes we all need a second wind, Rachel. Even you. Then came the surprise. A feature in a popular online magazine titled, "The 70-Year-Old Mentor Changing Lives." They had interviewed me after the Denver conference, and now my face was splashed across their homepage. Emily nearly screamed when she saw it. Grandma, you're trending on Twitter. Rachel hugged me tight. I'm so proud of you, Mom. Really proud. Mark chimed in from across the room. You're officially cooler than half my clients. For the first time, the laughter in that house felt easy, unforced. No undercurrent of tension, no quiet judgment, just family equal, whole, and proud. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and thought about the last year. I had gone from an invisible widow in a quiet house to someone who not only rebuilt her life but inspired others to rebuild theirs. And my family? They were finally beginning to see me not as a fragile piece of glass, but as a woman still growing, still dreaming. But something in me knew the story wasn't done. Because while we were healing, there was one more conversation to have. A final, honest one, about what family really meant when respect and love finally stood on equal ground. And that, I decided, would happen at Christmas. Christmas came faster than I expected. The lights on my street twinkled against the cold night air, and every house smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine. This year felt different not because the world had changed, but because I had. My house was warm, my business was thriving, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the family gathering. Rachel had invited me weeks in advance. Mom, this year's different, she'd said on the phone, her voice softer than I remembered. We want you there, and I want to do things right this time. On Christmas Eve, I put on a dark green sweater, black slacks, and a pair of small gold earrings Frank had given me on our 30th anniversary. I slipped my laptop into my handbag not because I planned to show off, but because I had a feeling it might come in handy. When I arrived, the house was bustling. Mark was tending to a roast in the kitchen, Emily was stringing up last-minute garland, and the boys were actually off their phones long enough to help set the table. Rachel hugged me at the door, holding on a moment longer than usual. "Merry Christmas, Mom," she whispered. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." The living room glowed with soft white lights, and under the tree were carefully wrapped gifts. But this time, one had my name on it in Emily's neat handwriting. My chest tightened as I bent to touch the tag. Dinner was lively, full of chatter and laughter. There was none of the strained politeness of past years. Rachel asked questions about my mentorship program, Mark joked about being the son-in-law of a minor celebrity, and Emily proudly told everyone how she was learning graphic design and online marketing. For once, I felt like part of the family story, not just a footnote. After dessert, Rachel stood up. "Before we do gifts, I just want to say something." She glanced at me, then at the others. "This year, I learned something from Mom. I learned that sometimes, when you think you're helping someone, you're actually holding them back. Mom, I'm sorry for all the ways I underestimated you." Her voice wavered. "You've shown me it's never too late to start over, and I want you to know I see you now not as someone who needs managing, but as someone I admire." The room was quiet for a beat. Then Mark clapped lightly, and Emily grinned. I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you, Rachel," I said softly. "That means more than you know." Then Emily jumped in, unable to contain herself. "Grandma, open my gift first." I unwrapped the box to find a sleek digital pen and drawing tablet. "So you can design your own covers," Emily said proudly. "And so we can design together." My throat tightened. "It's perfect, sweetheart." "Thank you." Rachel cleared her throat. "We also have something else." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a simple keychain with the word "Second Wind" engraved on it. "We wanted you to know we support what you're building. Completely." I smiled through my tears. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Later, when the gifts were all opened and the kids had gone upstairs, Rachel poured 2 cups of tea and joined me on the couch. "Mom, I've been working on something too. With your mentorship, I started my own coaching business." She handed me a small card. "Rachel Porter Career Coaching." I looked at her, stunned and proud. "Rachel, this is wonderful." She laughed nervously. "I guess I finally understand what it feels like to build something that's yours." "That's all I ever wanted for you," I said. "To know your worth doesn't depend on someone else's approval." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping tea, while the hum of family life carried on around us. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because we'd finally learned to see each other as equals. Before I left, I pulled out my laptop, opened a folder, and showed Rachel and Mark something I hadn't shared yet: the early plans for a Second Wind live retreat. "I'm thinking next fall," I said. "A full weekend of workshops and inspiration. I'm already talking to sponsors." Rachel smiled wide. "Mom, that's incredible. Can we come?" "Not to run it, just to cheer you on," I laughed. "Yes, you can come." That night, as I drove home, the roads were quiet, lined with houses glowing warm in the dark. I thought about Frank, about the years I'd spent waiting for someone else to give me permission to live fully, and about how different life felt now. I parked my car in the driveway, and sat there for a moment, breathing in the stillness. Inside, I made a cup of chamomile tea, sat at my desk, and opened a new blog draft titled, "The Gift I Gave Myself." I wrote about boundaries, about love, about how sometimes the greatest gift you can give the people you love is to show them you're strong enough to stand on your own. By morning, the post had gone viral, shared thousands of times, filling my inbox with messages from women saying they finally felt brave enough to take their own steps. I smiled, closed my laptop, and whispered to myself, Merry Christmas, Helen. You did it.